Welcome to my garden. You're watching A Walk in the Garden, and I'm Liz Davey, and this series of garden and kitchen shows is being filmed at my home in Norfolk. I'm starting out here in my herb garden, and wow, it's filled out in the last couple of weeks. Everything has really started to expand, and we're ready to do a lot of picking and using of herbs. The planting is finished. Now it's time to just enjoy and do a little weeding too. One of the things you can look for in the herb garden is things that have reseeded. I found that this year my lemon balm is all over, and that's my major weed in here, is just lemon balm. If I wanted to share some, I could pot up a couple of these little pieces that are growing here and there to share. But at this point, I think everybody I know has lemon balm that wants it, so I will just let them become weeds. A weed is really just a plant that's growing where you don't want it. There's nothing bad about weeds, they're just in the wrong place. We can start picking and enjoying these things, and I'm going to pick some oregano to dry. Oregano dried is really quite nice. It dries well. So I'm going to make a small bunch and cut it. You want to cut it before it blossoms, and it won't be blossoming for quite a while, but I'll be cutting it back several times to dry. And we'll put 4 or 5 stems together. Again, you don't want to put too much together with it. And then I have a rubber band, conveniently. A rubber band works better than string for drying herbs because the herbs will shrink as they dry. And if you use a rubber band, it will continue to hold on to them. Whereas string, even if you tie it tight now, will loosen as they dry. And I'll take these inside and hang them probably from one of my cupboard doors in a darker spot. You want to dry your herbs where it's fairly cool, and especially where it's dry and where it's not too bright. So you don't want to put them in bright sun or they'll lose all their color. They tend to lose color anyway. Be sure to label them. If you have 4 or 5 bunches of herbs hanging to dry, once they're dry, they all look alike. So be sure to label and know what you have hung where, so that when you're finished, you can label your dried herbs. So this will go back to the kitchen. Coming over this way, one of the other maintenance tasks for the garden, and I'm going to put this back in the dark, is cutting back the sorrel. And we'll cut that all the way back, and this will keep the sorrel going. Once it blooms, it tends to want to say, I'm done for the season. So we'll cut off any blooming stalks. I really don't want it to go to seed either because I have enough sorrel. If I did want it to go to seed or wanted to save the seeds, then I would continue to let it bloom. But I don't. This is true of rhubarb as well. If the rhubarb sends up a stalk, a bloom stalk, you can cut it off because it uses a lot of the energy of the plant. And what you want are the rhubarb stalks, so naturally you want to cut off that bloom stem and keep the stalks healthy and provide more for next year. The other thing that's important about working in the garden right now is insect spray. And I spray my ankles and the back of my neck. Ticks have been bad this year. They carry a lot of different diseases, and you really want to not have them on you. You don't want them to take hold. And so I do use insect spray. You can also use some herbal sprays. I've had better luck with just commercial insect spray. We do have a lot of woods here, We have deer, we have other creatures, and we do have ticks. The other thing you need to use is sunscreen. The sun is almost at its highest, a little later this month. It's early June now, but by mid-June, the sun will be at its highest, and sunscreen is a must if you're working outside. Also, a garden hat is a good idea if you're out for any length of time. I've put a few potted herbs into the garden this year. Usually I plant them in the ground and then dig them in the fall. This year I thought I would put a rosemary in a pot so that I could bring it in the fall without disturbing its roots. And also I have a bay leaf. This is a bay plant. The bay leaves can be used, and it is a very tender plant, so it definitely will need to come in the house in the winter. But it can stay out here all summer and hopefully grow. The only problem with keeping them in the pots is I have to remember to water them and keep them watered, because they will dry out a little faster. We have such a variety of herbs in here, all different kinds of thyme, savory, fennel, the bronze leaf fennel, we've seen the sorrel, and mint, a variety of mint. And I have chocolate mint right here. And this can be picked at any time, makes a great garnish. It's lovely in iced tea. Many uses for mint. Many recipes call for mint. A lot of Middle Eastern recipes will call for mint as part of the recipe itself. So it's always nice to have some. I have several varieties, chocolate mint, orange mint, and I have more of the spearmint variety. Also apple mint. There are a lot of different mints. The variegated ones tend to be very short-lived, and this is true of any variegated herb. Sage, mint, some of the thymes. If you get a variegated variety, don't count on it being super hardy. They usually don't last, for me at least, very long. And variegated plants in general, except for hosta, tend to be a little more tender. Now let's move over to the perennial garden. A spring garden is really no problem because so many plants bloom in the spring, and that's no exception here. The challenge is to keep your garden going all summer and into fall so that you have something in bloom all the time. But spring is in June, end of May, through early June. Things are really popping, and it's fun to see them. We have columbine, and this is a spurless variety called Nora Barlow. It also happens to spread quite easily, and I'll be digging that up all over. So I have quite a bit of it here and there in the garden. By spurless, it means it doesn't have the long tails of some of the other columbines. It has more of a flower shape, a puffy little flower, but it does add a lot of color in the spring. Iris, this is German iris. The German iris is now in bloom. I have purple ones, and I have too many purple ones. I've decided that perhaps next year I will cut back on the purple and add a few more colors. I also have white ones and a pink one, but I kind of like a yellow. They come in a variety of colors and even red, so it'll be fun to shop for some new iris next year. Roses are starting to bloom. This is a rugosa rose, and it's very fragrant, and it's really a nice one to have. It's nice to pick and bring in for a garnish, and very fragrant. They don't have long stems, so they're more available in the garden than in the vase, but you can use them as a garnish. Other roses will soon follow. Coming up here is Baptisia. This is a native plant, and it's in the pea family. As you can kind of tell if you look at the blossoms and the foliage, they look a lot like peas. Not edible, of course, but it is a pollinator favorite. Then I have a plant called Nectoscordum, which is has little bells. It's a bulb, and it has little yellow and silver bells on it. And this is a bulb, and it's called nectar garlic because Your foliage has a defined garlic scent. That means the deer don't like it at all. So hopefully the deer will just kind of stay out of this area. A lot of the alliums are that way. They have the onion scent and flavor, and whether this is just ornamental, it's not edible, but the deer still don't like it, at least edible for humans, and apparently for other creatures too. We have lots of alliums, and I keep planting these because, again, the deer don't like them. They're pretty easy care, and the seed heads make wonderful fall and winter decorations. So I'll just let these seed heads stay here. We have a nice honeybee buzzing around, and they will turn brown, but they'll still add some height and dimension to the garden even as they dry. And then once they've dried, I'll cut them off and save them and use them in decorations. They can also be spray painted once they're dry if you desire. Some people, even in the garden, will spray them bright colors. I don't generally do that, but I might spray them gold to put in with greens at Christmas. Siberian iris. I have white Siberian iris and purple. We'll get to the purple in a few minutes. This is full of buds. We've got a few of them that have popped out, but this will be covered with white Siberian iris. Nice to pick and very pretty in the garden. Once the blooms are gone, it needs to be deadheaded, which means cutting off the bloom stalks because they become pretty unsightly. And then the upright foliage just adds texture to the garden the rest of the season. It only blooms once. Poppies are ready to bloom. This is a pink poppy, and in front of it is a coral bell. Now, a lot of the coral bells have decorative foliage, and you grow them for the foliage, and their blooms are pretty insignificant. This particular one is grown, its foliage is pretty insignificant, just green, but its blooms add a lot of color, and as the blooms fade, I will cut them back, and it should continue to bloom pretty much all summer. It'll throw up sporadic bloom stems and add the pink to the garden. Now we'll go over to the other side of the garden. This is a hardy geranium, and it's a perennial, and there are several varieties. Roseanne is one that a lot of people grow. I've had no luck with it at all. I think this one is Brookside, is the name of it, the variety, but it's a nice blue. They also come in pink. I have a few with light pink flowers, and then some with dark pink flowers that we'll come to a little later in the garden. They're an easy care plant. They like a sunny location, and really don't require anything. They drop their blooms, or you can shear them off, and sometimes you'll get a second bloom if you do shear off the blooms when they're finished. I've been adding a few plants here and there in the back primarily, planting some canna lilies. These hopefully will be available for later summer and fall. I added a pineapple sage here. It's an herb, but I find that I don't have quite enough sun for it in my herb garden, so I add it to the flower garden. This is a tree peony, and the tree peony has finished blooming, and this is an example of the blooms, only most of them were twice this large. It's really a beautiful plant. I have a white one, a pale pink one, and then this dark pink one. But when it's finished, I will just cut off the spent blooms. And there were quite a few of them to be cut off. If you wanted to try growing them, I suppose you could save the seeds, which are forming in the middle. I have 3 of them. They take an extremely long time to grow, so I won't be growing any of them. This is Tradescantia Concord grape, and it has kind of overgrown its bounds, and I was not able to put it into some support. There are other plants behind it, and I will probably cut this back sooner rather than later. It has a purple blossom, but there are other things in bloom that can take its place. More allium is coming here. These are white ones, and they're a little later. You can buy the alliums that will bloom all season. You could have a whole garden of them, and have them bloom pretty much all summer. Poppies and peonies are about to bloom. I have both oriental poppies and peonies in different colors. This one's a red one, and there's a white one in back. Once they're gone, again, we will cut those back, and their foliage will just be a green spot all summer. These are English bluebells, which have just about finished. And you can either let them go to seed if you have them in the woods and want them to spread, or in the flower garden if you don't want them to spread. Again, when the blooms are gone, just cut them off. This is another of the coral bill or heuchera family, and you'll notice that its foliage is the thing that's most spectacular about it. It has the dark purple foliage. The blooms themselves are not really anything special. You can use them in a flower arrangement, but they're not extremely showy. This is a blue Siberian iris. Siberian iris grows very well here. In fact, almost too well, because it needs to be divided about every 3 years, or it just takes over the whole garden. We have a few daisies. I've put in a lemon verbena in this location. I have one also in the herb garden, but again, it gets more sun here, so that's going to be a desirable location to have it grow larger, even though it's an herb. You can mix your herbs in with your vegetables or flowers. You don't have to have a separate herb garden. We have some daisies and then a white iris. And the white iris is a reblooming iris. It doesn't always rebloom for me, but some years it will put up bloom stalks in August. There are several varieties called reblooming. Some bloom more reliably than others, and it really takes a season with the exactly right kind of weather. This is an oriental poppy, and it's called Patty's Plum. It will be out in another week or so. It has a lot of fat buds. And again, we have purple allium over here, which are nice to have for a spot of color in this area before the white peony comes out. This is another one of the geraniums. This one is a common one. It's almost wild in this area, and it has the hot pink blooms. This is another type, which is Geranium macrosium, which is almost another hot pink, but a little lower and a little different foliage on this one. A good low plant for the front of the border. I have roses that will be coming out soon, and of course more of the purple iris. You can see I've got purple iris here and there. I think it's time for some new colors. That pretty much wraps up what we need to do here. Weeding and mulching. That's our task, and as you can see, my plants are pretty full, and they don't leave much space between for weeds to grow, which is fine. This is a reseeded plant, which is an annual poppy, and we let it go to seed last year, and here and there throughout this garden I have the poppies that will be in bloom in another month, and we'll be able to see those at that time. Now it's time to move on to the vegetable garden. We finally got the pea fence up in the vegetable garden, and the peas are starting to actually blossom, and they're climbing up the fence, which will make it a little easier to pick the peas. It keeps them off the ground. The strawberries have been netted. I use green dress netting, just from the fabric store. I find this works fairly well, and you can see the strawberries through it, but it keeps the birds and chipmunks out a bit. Chipmunks tend to be my worst problem in the garden, and hopefully their numbers are a little fewer this year. Some years they have devastated the patch, and they can get under just about anything you put on. So hopefully they will stay out. I do have an electric fence around my garden, as well as a separate fence about 4 feet away, 4 to 5 feet away. Deer don't like to jump 2 fences. They'll jump one without any problem at all. But when there are two, they really don't have space to land in the middle and then jump again. So 2 fences will help keep the deer out. The electric fence has been pretty good for us. We can put up a 3rd wire if deer do become a problem. I have a wire about 2 inches above the ground, which helps keep the woodchuck out. Another one a little higher, and we can turn it on and off. It does give a little zing if you touch it, but it won't kill you. And it does, however, kill an occasional bird, for which I am very sorry. But it does keep the woodchuck out. Prior to putting in the electric fence, the woodchucks would come in from outside the garden and just eat everything in sight. So it has been a good preventer for us. I have planted most of my crops now, in fact all of my crops, because I'm out of space. I could always plant more, but I'm out of space, and I still plant them fairly close together. We can pick spinach. That was planted quite a bit earlier, probably the earliest thing I put in, and we're going to use some spinach today in the kitchen, and we'll pick that now before it gets too hot. The spinach goes. It likes cooler weather. We've had cooler weather, so this year, finally, I'm getting a good little spinach crop here. I have cabbages and Brussels sprouts and broccoli. I'll watch those now for any insect activity. If I start to see the leaves are chewed, I'll use an organic insect control. The beans have germinated. At least part of the beans have germinated. And if the other beans don't germinate, it's still time to plant more. This is the nice thing about planting things like beans. You can continue to plant them right into August and still harvest some. I've planted my cucumbers around the teepee, and as soon as they come up, we only have 1 or 2 of them up, but as soon as they've come up fully, I'll put in my strings so that they can climb up, and there'll be a high crop on those instead of having them all over the ground. I've got the tomatoes caged, but they need stakes because the cages won't hold them once they get their full size. We have scallions that we can pick. I planted my onions fairly close together so that we could pick scallions out of the garden, and we can pick those now and have those ready for salads to go with the lettuce that we are taking out of our planters. And I also have some lettuce starts that I put in that will be ready to pick in about a week. So we should have continuous greens and lettuce from now through September or October if I keep planting a row every once in a while. As one finishes, a new one will take over. I do have arugula, which is also used in salads, up at the other end, and kale. So we should have salad all summer without having to buy too much lettuce or any lettuce. Some of the herbs are slow to germinate this year because I got them in a little later, but they are coming. I've got a lot of oregano, borage, marjoram, and other herbs that are coming up, and a few flowers too. We can pick the parsley from last year while we're waiting for the new parsley. I've got a row of flowers in here that are just starting, so I don't want to step on those. You'll see that part of the garden is mulched. I have waited until things germinated to mulch so that I don't cover up the little growing plants along the way. I have some fennel that I'm trying this year. That's a new crop for me. I always try to plant a couple different things new and give them a try. Fennel is one. This is a bulbing fennel. I have bronze fennel in the herb garden, and I have regular fennel here that forms a bulb. We'll see if it works. I've got eggplant and peppers planted. Half a dozen of each is plenty for 2 people. And this year I'm trying something new, and that is tomatillos. And I have one that's already in blossom. I started these from seed in the house, and so far they seem to be doing pretty well. I have them down at this end of the garden, which gets a little more shade because I've been told that they do fine in part shade. So we'll see. We will just have to wait and see how they do. Pretty much what's left to do in the vegetable garden is weeding and mulching. That seems to be the case all around. Weeding and mulching and taking care of edges. as long as things have been planted. Let's move back over and do some containers. This is a large flowered clematis in bloom. They bloom in the spring. Sometimes you can get a repeat bloom in the fall. It's never happened to me. I have a feeling that you maybe need to be a little further south to get a lot of repeat blooms. This is one called Guernsey Cream, and it seems to be very happy in this location. Clematis tends to sulk if it's not happy in the location, and this is in a almost westward facing location, kind of southwest. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but apparently it does, because some clematis will grow better facing north or south. I have a book on clematis which lists some of those things, and so I guess it's fairly important. They do need to be planted fairly deep, and they take a few years to mature. This one's been here probably for 15, 20 years. And every spring I get a gorgeous set of bloom on it, and then I need to cut it back so that we can see the light that's underneath it. It doesn't look great all winter. It's just a lot of dead stems, but it certainly makes up for it in June when it blooms with its lovely blossoms. It really lights up the area even without the light being turned on. Now let's plant a couple containers with some annuals. My spring containers were planted with pansies or violas, these are violas, and lettuce. And I've been using the lettuce, but now it's time to add some more annuals to the mix. I've already added a dahlia and this succulent plant, which will have red blooms, and it's time to pull the rest of the lettuce. And what I've been doing is just pulling it out and then cutting off the stem and putting it in my basket, harvest basket. And we'll take it in and wash it and put it in the refrigerator. That leaves me some space to plant some other things in. And this is a new plant to me. It's an ornamental oregano. Ornamental meaning you're not going to eat it, but it should have some interesting blooms, and it is one that kind of sprawls over the edge, as does this one. And we'll loosen the roots and just plant it right in. Over on the other side, I'll add a verbena. And again, this should grow a little taller. And I'm going to leave my center viola in for now. It may not make it all winter, but or I'm all summer. And I might transplant it later on as some of these other things take over. This is a purple verbena. And this is a cordyline, and this will grow up and add some height to the garden, which we badly need in this one. And I'll put that in back. Again, planting annuals, you need to sometimes break up the roots if they're heavily rooted. And then be sure to water them in well. The verbena was particularly dry, so we will give that a good drink. And I'll continue to water these every day or so if it doesn't rain until they're very well established. Actually all summer, and we'll fertilize them about once every 2 weeks. You can also add the fertilizer extended release right into the soil as you plant. So we've transitioned from spring to summer in this planter. And now we're going to move up to one that's in the shade and plant that. This one's in pretty much full sun all day. I may made a lot of coleus cuttings last year. In fact, I made too many cuttings. I had way too many that took and were overgrown and a little too tall. So next year I won't make as many. But we have some red lettuce in this planter. And again, we need to cut that out and put it in the harvest basket. And there's also still a few pansies which we can leave. But we want to get rid of the roots. I'm going to add some coleus, and I bought one, a new one, a darker color one, and I have the I have my cuttings, and I've cut some of them back. They will bush out, I'm almost certain. And I have several different kinds of those. Some with variegated leaves and some, again, with the plain green leaves. And these we'll put around the edge. And they're very well rooted. And because some of them were very leggy, I have cut off some of the stems, you can see. But there are new shoots growing on those stems. So they will fill in. And we have the spot where our lettuce was. And we will plant that in. And again, water it in well and watch it grow. Could probably put one more over on this side, which I do have. I'm going to water the top of this one because it got a little soiled along the way. And we'll watch this fill in as time goes by. Now let's go around to the back. And I'll put this over here and go back to the pond for just a few minutes. The hosta and ferns have really taken a jump up with the warm weather we've had and all the rain. Hostas particularly like very damp weather, and we've had it, so they've grown very large. I've put out some impatiens in containers. I will put a few more in the ground a little later. They're still growing inside, though I'm waiting till they get a little bigger to put them out. And also it might be a little drier. Slugs are a big problem with both hosta and impatiens. I'll use the slug things around it. Even in the container, the slugs will manage to get to them. So I will use the little iron oxide slug pellets. They're a safer alternative if you have pets than some of the metaldehyde baits, which are very, very poison. The iron is something the plants need anyway, so a little of that won't hurt them, and it won't hurt any pets or wild animals that get into it. I have a chipmunk problem back here. You'll notice little holes here and there. What they're getting are my crocuses. And these are Crocus tomasianus, which they will tell you are squirrel proof, but they're not chipmunk proof. And you do get them, but I found over the years, I used to be very upset and think they would get every crocus I had, but they don't. And not only don't they get them, they replant them. So they'll be coming up who knows where next year. They seem to like to get the bulbs and then they dig a hole and save them. So I will have to fill all these little holes and clean up this whole area once the crocus foliage has all browned over. And it's browning over right now. We're getting a lot of it that can be raked out or just left to. But once it turns brown and comes out easily, I will take it out. And then this area needs some mulch between the stepping stones, and I will be filling the holes as we go once the chipmunks have decided to move on. And they will probably move on to my strawberries, which doesn't thrill me a great deal, but that seems to be the way it goes with chipmunks. They're awfully cute, but they can be a real menace. Some people have them actually pull the plants right out of the planters. They tend to go under them and pull them out and unplant them for you. Almost as bad as a puppy. Now I'll go back by the pond. And our pond is cleared up nicely. I've put some plants into it, some elephant ears. Some of them I had inside over the winter. Others, I have one that's got a reddish leaf that's brand new and very tiny still. We have some iris, which stayed here all winter, and it'll probably have one bloom on it. It's an Iris pseudocaris, which is an invasive species, so I'll make sure that I don't let it go to seed in the area around here. And I have it in a pot to just keep it contained. Our fish are doing well. All 7 made it through the winter, and they will be coming up to have a little snack. And to keep the pond clear, about once a week I'll add a package of the enzyme treatment. And it's just enzymes that help break down any waste so that it can be filtered out. I also have added an aerator, which has 2 little balls on it that cause the water to have more air in it, a few bubbles here and there, and that helps clear it too. It keeps it circulating, and it helps. I don't particularly want to be guilty of growing mosquitoes in the pond, and keeping the water moving also helps with that. Mosquitoes won't lay eggs in flowing water, so we want to keep the water moving as much as possible. I've needed to clean the filters probably once a day for the last couple weeks, or every other day, depending on whether it was raining or not. And that has helped clear up the pond so that we can almost see the bottom quite clearly now. At least we can see the fish, and they aren't hidden in a murky pond. And the water looks fairly clean. Again, I've added some flowers. The waterfall is running well, and the pond will pretty much take care of itself except for cleaning the filter. It'll be down to more like once a week now that the pond's clear, and once all of the little maple airplanes, I call them, maple seeds, have fallen. We've had an awful lot of those, and that, unfortunately, they're overhead, so we get a lot of those in the pond. When the wild roses bloom, we'll get a lot of wild rose petals. So we do have to clean the filter of those things. If your pond's in the sun, you may have more in the way of algae problems, but less in the way of things from trees falling into it. Rhododendrons are in full bloom. Right now I have various colors of them here and there, mostly the common purple ones, and I still love those. The time to prune your rhododendron is after bloom. You can see the new growth on it. You can prune some of that off, but right after bloom, when you're taking off the old blooms, is the time to cut them back if they're getting out of control. This one's a little out of control. We'll probably cut it back a little bit so that the things underneath are more visible. Others around the front also need to be cut back, and the time for azaleas is also now. Spring blooming plants are pruned right after they bloom. Fall blooming plants can be pruned in early spring. A lot of times people will prune everything either in the fall. And unfortunately, if you prune in the fall, you'll lose a lot of spring bloom because you're cutting it off. So your spring blooming plants should be pruned right after they bloom. Of course, anytime you can take off a damaged branch or a dead branch, or one that's completely in the way and getting in your way over a walk or something. But generally, that's a good rule of thumb to follow. Now let's go inside and do a little cooking and use some of that spinach and some of the scallions that we picked from the garden. I have a bowl of cold water, and the greens that we picked outside I'm going to just put in it, and if there's any spot where I can pull out anything that needs to be pulled out on the way through. This is kind of a preliminary wash, and we'll probably run them through 2 washes. But I want to get them into the cold water, and I'll let those soak a few minutes. And then as I put them into the basket, I will further take out any pieces that might be damaged, or pieces of core or anything else, weeds that might have gotten involved in with the lettuce. But cold water for a soak, and then I will put it into the basket and then put it into another dish of cold water to double wash it. This is especially important if they've been splashed with dirt, to get all the dirt out of them. And always lift the greens out of the cold water into the basket. Don't strain them into the basket. Otherwise, you'll pull all the dirt goes right in with them. You want to leave the dirt in the bottom of the bowl and then pour it out. And then, after 2 washes, I will spin the greens, put it back into the empty bowl, and spin them until they're quite dry. And then I can put them into a plastic bag in the refrigerator or a bowl, and they will be good for a number of days worth of salads. So we'll just let those soak, and we're going to start by making dessert first. Always have dessert first. Isn't that what they say? And what I've done, I'm going to make a pineapple upside down cake. And am going to give you the full recipe as I speak, but I'm actually making half a recipe in a smaller pan. The original recipe would use a 10-inch cast iron skillet, or a 10-inch cake pan could also be used. I've melted a 1/4 cup of butter in the skillet, and I did that in the oven. And I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And mix that until it's thoroughly mixed with the butter. We're doing the top of the cake first. The top is on the bottom. That's why it's an upside down cake. And we'll spread this quite around the pan. And this also greases the pan. And then we'll add the fruit. And I'm going to be using pineapple, but you could add peaches, plums, any fruit that's in season. And I'll put 3 in the middle. And then I have 2 left. You would have a larger pan and more pineapple. You'd have 10 slices. And what I'll do is fit these in around the edge and perhaps even in the middle. And then I'm using maraschino cherries. You could also use fresh sweet cherries, and put them upside down on top of the pineapple pieces. I'm using 7 half cherries. Okay, and then about 7 pecans. And again, put them upside down because you want them right side up when you take the cake out of the oven. And just fill in the spaces. And there we have a nice little design. Again, you can do what you wish with it. Now we're going to make the cake itself. And I'm going to use 1.5 cups of flour. Three-quarters of a cup of sugar. 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon baking soda, and 1/4 teaspoon salt. I want to make sure I get all that out. I'm going to add a little bit of a 1/2 cup of sour cream to 3 egg whites and a teaspoon of vanilla. And the rest of the sour cream I'll be putting in to mix. The rest of the half cup. And we want 9 tablespoons of soft butter. And about a half cup of milk, which we'll add to the dry ingredients. And then I'm going to mix those for at least a minute and a half. We'll start out slow and speed up. Now that that's thoroughly mixed, I will add the 3 egg yolks and the rest of the sour cream that we added to them, and a teaspoon of vanilla. I'll need this later. And start slow and mix that in well. A little bit off the beaters here. And then we'll add this to the over our topping. And spread it out. This goes into the oven for about 40 minutes at 350 degrees. And then when you take it out, you turn it upside down immediately. Most cakes you leave in the pan for about 5 minutes. With an upside down cake, you go around the edge with a knife and then turn it out immediately onto the plate. And you come up with something like this. If the fruit happens to stick, then you need to just get it out of the pan with a spatula and put it back on top of the cake. Usually they come out very nicely, and you come up with a lovely upside down cake, and you can serve that with a puff of whipped cream, maybe a little ice cream. Makes a nice dessert. And an old-fashioned one, but still good. And again, you can use a variety of fruits in season as well as canned pineapple. Peaches, plums, apricots are especially nice. Just remember that the bottom is going to be the top when you arrange your fruit in the pan. Now the next thing I want to do is make a grain bowl. Grain bowls are kind of popular. I went out to Tower Hill last week, and their cafe was serving a grain bowl type, several different grain bowl type things, and we've been eating these too. It's mainly a meal in a bowl, and it's very handy if you want to eat on the porch because you don't have to take out too many things. If you prepare your grain bowl in the house, you can just carry it out with you. And we're going to start with the grain, and I'm using today farro. Farro is a type of wheat, an old-fashioned type of wheat. And the idea is we're going to put everything in the bowl. So we'll put our serving of grain in one corner. And it's how you arrange it to make it look attractive that's kind of half the battle. So this is farro. It's been cooked and chilled. You could also have your grain hot or your protein hot. What's hot and what's cold doesn't really make a difference. Other grains that can be used, this is farro. And I'm going to kind of set up the grains. And quinoa is another one. Quinoa is a very high protein grain, which is very good if you're not going to put any other type of protein or much protein in with it. Brown rice is another option, or white rice. We prefer the brown. But farro is one of our favorites. It's very good as a side dish as well as a nutritious whole grain menu item. The next thing we're going to add is greens. And greens make up a good part of it. And I'm going to use the spinach that I picked in the garden, and it's been double washed and dried. And we'll put in a good portion of the spinach. And then we want to complement the protein in the grain with some beans. Or we're going to add some chicken too. But these are chickpeas, and I have marinated these for about 30 minutes in a dressing that I made with half a teaspoon of dry mustard, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of garlic, 1/3 cup of oil, and I used canola oil in this because if I put it in the refrigerator, olive oil congeals, and if we're going to serve it cold, we don't want it congealed oil. And then 3 tablespoons of vinegar, and you can use red wine vinegar, white wine vinegar, balsamic vinegar, any type of vinegar that you would like in this. I happen to use cider vinegar because I thought it would be good with the dish. Again, you've got a variety of beans you can use. Kidney beans, black beans, cannoli beans, and of course the garbanzo beans, which I'm using, or chickpeas if you wish to call them that. Then we can add some other things, fill in. This one I'm going to add some chicken, and this is grilled chicken. Cold grilled chicken. Could be rotisserie chicken that you have left. You could cook it just for making grain bowls or add it. This is going to be a fairly high protein one because we're going to add some other protein in the form of hard cooked eggs, and they also add to it. Again, the dressing from these beans can also, you can put a little bit of it on, I can get a little bit out, onto the spinach. This will serve as the dressing for the whole thing, or you can add another dressing of your choice. We have a few beans that got away. But more vegetables are also good, and so I'm going to add some shredded carrot, some chopped tomatoes, and some scallions. We'll just kind of put those here and there, again from the garden. And then you can add nuts of your choice. Walnuts, toasted are good. These happen to be almonds. You don't have to add all of these items at any one time. You can have more of one and less of another. It's kind of up to you. And then I'm going to top it with some blue cheese. And this is a meal in a bowl. Again, you can use any combination that you want. I'm going to just kind of set all the ingredients around it. So you can see what goes into a grain bowl, or can go in. It's up to you which vegetables you add. Green beans could substitute when they're in season. Certainly you don't have to add nuts, but it adds a nice crunch. Any type of vegetables are a good source. And of course we have our grain. And again, you don't have to add meat. Meat is definitely optional, although if you have some, it also makes a nice addition. So we'll put this on the table with our upside down cake, and you might want to serve a piece of bread with it or not. You have your starch in the grain, so. And got a few beans lined up, and we'll put our flower arrangement over on the table. Thank you for joining me. This has been A Walk in the Garden. I'm Liz Davey, and be sure to join us in the next segment, which will be in a few weeks, and see what is growing in the garden and what we can prepare in the kitchen from what we harvest in the garden. You have been watching NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television.